Okay. So as you know, the college is involved in this school effectiveness framework from Ontario, and we're currently been in SEF 1 for some time now. And as you're aware, it comes from the very best of educational research. And Hattie's work aligns pretty nicely with SEF 1. So if you've never seen his effect barometer, that's it there. 0.4, that's the average of all effects in schools. You want to be above 0.4. But typically we range in the 0.2 to 0.4 area in schools. The yellow part is just the things that would really happen outside of school. They're developmental issues, and then there are some detrimental things that we can do with kids as well. So Hattie arrived at that after 15 years of research with his team, 50,000 studies, 250 million kids involved with it. And he was able to create this barometer, this metric, which is really quite helpful. He summarises the entire 250 million kids in 50,000 studies into 6 points in his books. Point 6, he says this: teachers need to know the learning goals and success criteria of their lessons, know how well they are attaining these criteria for all students, and know where to go to next in light of the gap between the students' current knowledge and their understanding and the success criteria of where are you going, how are you going, and where to next. And today we're going to look at what's in the very bedrock of SEF 1, and that's just assessment, making things transparent, so hence the transparency, and it's learning goals. So assessment is a verb, it's what we do, and the learning goal is one of the more critical tools that we use in this process. Now let's remind you from last term, the reason we're involved in the assessment as, for and of learning, that whole transparency piece is get it right and you'll get up to 0.8, which put in layman's terms is about 2 years academic growth in one. So if you have multiple teachers in the year level engaging with kids in that way over a couple of years, you'll then start harnessing that sort of size effect. The learning goal itself is 0.6, so it's pretty high. It's actually quite incredibly high. It's one of the higher ones. So 0.6, the actual tool we're looking at is there so that we can leverage it up to 0.8. Why is that? Well, I suppose it grows self-efficacy, that belief in kids that they have control over their learning. It builds metacognition, that ability to think about their learning, and it develops our learners to be self-monitoring and self-directed. So that whole virtuous cycle of like, I came, I saw, I conquered. I can see where I'm going, I'm engaged in the process and know what it is, and at the end I conquer it, so therefore I want to do it all over again. Now if that is true, and if you can't find a research base against Hattie, that's motivation enough to do learning goals. If that is true, and if you can't argue with Hattie, then that is motivation enough to be involved in these learning goals. And hence our learning goals for this afternoon are simply, for this afternoon and in our classrooms, to be able to write effective learning goals and to understand the impact these have on student learning. And a learning goal, I think quite simply understood, is kids understand what is to be learned. It's as simple as that. The kids will understand what's to be learned, and therefore what does achievement look like.
So by focusing in on one specific criteria or one specific learning goal, it allows me to pinpoint where the student's strengths and weaknesses are. From there, we can do quick little checks, whether it's circulating through the class or whether it's a quick little exit card on the way out to see, yes, I meet that learning goal, or no, I don't. Well, again, looking at our learning goals from this unit, we've been working on for the last few days things such as adding and subtracting polynomials, multiplying polynomials.
It's critical that students and teacher share a common understanding of the learning goal. When developing the goals, pay careful attention to the language.
When we're writing our learning goals, we want to make sure that it's going to be in a language that the students are going to understand. Often many in the mathematics expectations, they're very complicated and they're sometimes written in language that the students don't or aren't able to grasp. So we often will rewrite the expectations in a simpler language for the students. In this particular case, the simplifying, do they know what it means to simplify polynomials? That simplifying is a key word because it's a key descriptor that they will find when handling these types of questions or problems. Hopefully when we're finished, they will be able to tell me what that means in their own language.
So the success criteria, what's the roadmap to get us to the learning goal? Is learning goals are simple, clear, transferable, across context and visible to students. And secondly, students are able to articulate what they are learning and why. So in terms of our focus, where we're headed, that's where it is. And the second one would be measuring our success at that point with the kids.
We've talked about learning goals a lot, and we've talked about the fact that the learning goal comes from the document that teachers use to figure out what you need to know. One of the problems with using a learning goal that comes right out of the document is that sometimes the language that's used is difficult to understand. So this morning, we're going to take a look at the learning goal, and we're going to see which words are keywords, which words we understand, and which words we can get rid of or change and use a different word. And hands up, I'd like to know some of the words that you think we absolutely need to keep in there. Keegan.
Explain.
Explain. I think that's a good one too. Explain. We need that word. Okay? And how have I asked you to explain this assignment? I've asked you to explain it in two ways. What's one?
With the learning goals clearly established, both the teacher and the students are able to measure progress toward achieving the goals at the end of each day's learning and determine next steps.
At the end of the class, you'll reflect on how close you are to the learning goal, and you'll also write down any steps that you need to take to get you there.
Okay, so at this point in the lesson, we are going to assess whether you have met the learning goal. So the final learning goal over there says that you are going to be able to, by the end of the class, simplify polynomial expressions through addition and subtraction. What I would like you to do on your whiteboard is copy this polynomial expression, and then I would like you to simplify it. Once you're done, put your whiteboard up, and I will verify that your answer is correct.
Learning goal up the top to write an effective characterisation, but they then put the success criteria into two different subsets. They talked about the product that they're looking at, so in terms of the success criteria for an effective characterisation, and then the process about how we do it. I like that because it's so easy to quickly slide into just a checklist only, and it's more than a checklist, and next term or early next year we'll look at success criteria. But I found that quite helpful to think of the learning goal, which obviously goes across specific contexts, but even the success criteria I found helpful in terms of product and process. And also in terms of learning goals, I'd read about it quite a few times, but the new science teacher for next year used this in a lesson when she did a lesson for us as part of the interview process. She wrote on the board, Walt, Wilf and Tib. So she talked to the kids about, we are learning to do this today. What I found nice about it there, she then spoke about why. So quite often we have to deal with discrete segments of knowledge, which we know the broader context to. We know that we have to solve a polynomial for some, I don't know what reason. But her process made sure, for life, that's right. It's the knowledge of the world. What I'm looking for, and this is because. So if it was polynomials, I would have found out the reason for it there, and at the end of the day, what we were looking for in that one there. There's other ones as well. There's SWBAT, which I think, yes, I've got the nod of yes from Rosanna, which is students will be able to. So just quite often something like that will engage the kids straight away with the learning goal, or you can just call it learning goal. Of course, as you look at the bigger picture of things, I do think there's an elephant in the room as we speak about these things. And I have found what I think is probably the best video to explain what I mean by that.
Dem Feind gelungen, die Front in breiter Formation zu durchbrechen. Im Süden hat der Gegner Zossen genommen und stößt auf Stahnsdorf vor. Der Feind operiert jetzt am nördlichen Stadtrand zwischen Frohnau und Pankow, und im Osten ist der Feind bis zur Linie Lichtenberg-Marsdorf-Karlshorst gelangt.
Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Es bleiben im Raum Keitel, Jodl, Krebs und Burgdorf.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl! Wer schickt Sie? Dass Sie es wagen, sich meinen Befehl zu widersetzen! So weit ist das also gekommen. Das Militär hat mich belogen! Jeder hat mich belogen, sogar die SS! Die gesamte Generalität ist nichts weiter als ein Haufen niederträchtiger, treuloser Feiglinge!
Mein Führer, ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie verbringen...
Nicht als Feiglinge! Verreiter, Versager!
Mein Führer, was Sie da sagen, ist ungeheuerlich!
Die Generalität ist das Geschmeiß des deutschen Volkes! Sie ist ohne Ehre! Sie nennen sich Generale, weil Sie Jahre auf Militärakademien zugebracht haben, nur um zu lernen, wie man Messer und Gabel hält! Jahrelang hat das Militär meine Aktionen nur behindert! Es hat mir jeden nur erquicklichen Widerstand in den Weg gelegt! Ich hätte gut daran getan, von Jahren alle höheren Offiziere liquidieren zu lassen, wie Stalin!
I've yet to see Tony go like that, so
I learned everything I know from Adolf Hitler.
it's yes, it's a journey piece. Remember, it's a journey piece. That's the point I want to get across. So from last time we talked about the educational positioning statement. So I want to zoom out from learning goals just for a couple of seconds. So we've got the assessment piece there. So whether we're starting a new unit, we're assessing to see where they are, or we're doing those constant checks for understanding throughout it. We're establishing where the students are in their learning. The learning goal, obviously we're identifying the learning destination. So if Mr. GPS here was working, there'd be a little teardrop just there like Google Maps does. Carefully plans a route. So on Google Maps you've got that red line that goes everywhere. That's obviously the success criteria. Makes regular checks of progress on the way, and certainly your GPS in your car tells you if you go off course at all, and then makes adjustment to the course as conditions dictate. Fortunately my GPS doesn't yell at me. It says, please do a U-turn at your earliest convenience. So that's the bigger picture. And we engage kids in that, I think, through the 3 questions that I read from Hattie's book a moment ago. There's the I know phase. Where am I going? So we've got a learning goal that's clear, we've got success criteria, and we've got exemplars. So the I know where I'm going. There's the target, and I'm about to hit it. There's the I can phase. So it's the how am I going question. You know, the light bulb's coming on, I can celebrate success as I go along, and that's the question we need to train kids to ask over and over again, because it's from that question that you then feed into the question before and after it. And then the I will phase, the where to next question. And you can't read it, but I will goal set for improvement. It's the question that makes me better than my best. And if we start telling kids, I'm happy with your best, then we need to change that, because we're happier with better than their best. We know how to make kids improve beyond what they know, because that's our job to do it. So let's zoom back down into the nitty-gritty. What is a learning goal? So on page 3, it says define learning goals. And I don't want to do that by a definition. We're not about to come up with a definition of what a learning goal is. Rather, I want to use words and phrases, a bit of brainstorming, to more of a paint a picture of what it is at this point. So in a moment, I'm going to put on a timer, and we can all thank Larry for that because he's super awesome. And I'll give you 2 minutes. So in the next 2 minutes, I just want you to write down the words and phrases that come up for you as you think about the concept of learning goals. Okay, let's go for that first.
Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
There we go. 2 minutes is a long time, isn't it? 30 seconds would be much better. Okay, with our elbow partner now, you're going to compare lists. You're going to see what's similar and different and discuss those similarities and differences.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
Okay, so we have we've done a think. We've thought about what we think the concept area is. We've done a pair with your elbow partner. Our last moment is going to be to square that up, so 2 lots of elbow partners talking together. As you talk this time though, can you just highlight just a small handful of what you think the important things out of all 4 people have said? So perhaps 3 or 4 things. Let's see.
Can we do a whole table?
Yes, you can do 6 if that works better. So don't bother moving around.
Come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back.
Okay, we shall draw that to a close. As I ask some particular people to help me now, they're going to say something they thought that was noteworthy that somebody else said. So you can't say what you think, you've got to say what somebody else said. And you need to tell me which of the 2 columns on page 3 they belong in. Is it a concept that is more about why the learning goal is powerful, or is it a concept which more describes exactly what they are? So our first volunteer is Marie. Marie, what would you like to say that somebody else said?
Student-friendly terminology is one of the things that we have.
Excellent.
Precise words that you're using. Having like a roadmap is another
Okay,
one we have.
so we have to stick with the one. So the student-friendly language, do you think that is, and these will probably often live in both categories of why they're powerful or what they are, but which one do you think it best describes it? What it is, or it's where its power comes from?
I would say what it is, like, because, I put it into my definition of mine. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Tim Gutsa, what did someone else say? So did we hear that, Mr. Fern?
No.
Can you speak up a bit louder, please?
It's what we want students to know.
Okay, and do you think, yep, and is that more about what it is or why they're powerful?
It's what it is.
Yep, I would think so too. Nathan Trethui, what did somebody say to you?
We didn't get that far. Sorry. I shared. Stop holding the conversation.
Yeah, the spotlight Saturday night and suddenly wants it Monday afternoon. Nicole Brown, can you tell me something somebody said?
Someone said high expectations.
Yep, and do you think that's more about it, where the power of a learning goal is? Yeah, without a doubt, I think. Sick people. Sick people. Tim Hadfield isn't sick. Tim. He's fully sick, dude.
We have a few things, but I think achievable and measurable.
Achievable and measurable. Very true. Very true. Some things that I thought of just to is that learning intentions describe the goals of what we want our students to know, understand and learn by the end of the lesson. So I'm not sure if you noticed Hitler kept on talking about that, about skills, knowledge and... Oh, forgot his third one. Isn't that terrible? Yes, Mornay?
Because we had a bit of a philosophical discussion on learning goal in terms of we can have unit goals that can move over several lessons, or you can have learning goals for each lesson.
Yep.
So which are we referring to?
Both. Both.
So because we just had a discussion about if we had our learning goals on for a particular unit up on the wall, does that mean we still have to write down learning goals for every single lesson on the board?
How I see it playing out in classrooms in the college is that we will have an assessment piece that we have gone back from and said to achieve that piece of assessment to the highest possible standard with high expectations, the kids will need these learning goals. So there's a set of learning goals attached to an assessment piece, and then sometimes multiple of those will run over a few periods, but sometimes it'll just be one of those that runs. So in science, you might start off with your teaching process over the 6 weeks leading up to the assessment, starting off with some, the underlying knowledge and understanding. So the learning goal for there would stay as that, just the underpinning knowledge. But then later on, when you're dealing more with the broader assessment piece, there'll be multiple learning goals going on. I think if we're defining it that closely, we're probably changing a learning goal to the success criterias. Yep. Clearly state what students are learning, the skills, knowledge and understanding. They need to be simple, visible, reusable, and shouldn't be confused with the context. Why should we have learning goals? I'm glad you asked that question. If I give you a piece of paper, you need to find a partner to help you with this, and I'll tell you your instruction in a moment. So just hang on to the paper, please, and wait for the instruction. Can you randomly hand out one word to people far and wide? Anyone? Okay, so as my helpers are helping, let me explain what we're doing. Nudge. Oh, thank you. I forgot about the nudge part. That's so important, isn't it? There are two sides to this room. There is the positive impacts on teachers' side, and over here, there's the positive impacts on student learning side. If you have a poster, you and a friend are going to go to one side or the other, because you're going to say, I predict that my sentence is about the positive impacts on teachers, or my poster is about the positive impacts on students. Once they've done that, and they'll need to line up in a line so we can all clearly see them from where we're sitting, there are people with the missing words. It's just a close activity. They have to find the place where their word is missing. The role of all the rest of us is to try and help those people. So it's probably going to end up being a bit noisy. So first of all, if our poster people can with a friend go to either side of the room. That's your decision. Yeah, that'd be a good thing. Okay, I'll fire it. So if you can stand on the side of the room and hold it up for everyone to see. Now if you choose a side, I'm sorry. Put your stake in the ground. You can always move later on. Once you find the word, you can move.
I need the word pause.
have anything we can stick it on the map.
Now, Larry, you want to fix it? Who's got words? When you get a word, you'll need to blue tack it on. When you get a word, you can blue tack it on. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You can blue tack it on. Morning. You can blue tack it on. Morel.
Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high, bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. The love is too high, bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
Thank you.
Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you.
Let's see something one of our overseas friends prepared earlier along that theme.
Pay particular attention to the verb. It needs to be something specific and observable. Abstract verbs like understand or appreciate make it difficult for students to have a clear target of what they are striving to achieve.
It must be phrased from the student's perspective.
I agree. That's why I have up on my board, by the end of class, I will be able to do something, or I will know, or I will explain, I will identify, to make it personal for them.
Some specific expectations do meet the criteria for learning goals and could be shared with little or no alteration. Here's a specific expectation from Grade 7 Science and Technology, Understanding Matter and Energy. Identify the components of a solution. The statement identifies the knowledge the student is to demonstrate. The verb is specific, and the student will be able to determine whether the goal has been met. The learning is clearly defined in language appropriate for most intermediate students. Note that the subject-specific vocabulary, which is part of the learning for students, is maintained. The statement is brief and concise, and when it is shared with students, the teacher will rephrase this from a student perspective as, I am learning to identify the components of a solution. Finally, the statement identifies an incremental step in a progression of learning. Here are some learning goals which identify additional knowledge and skills to build student understanding.
It's an integral part of my lessons every day. Not just to have the learning goals, but to discuss them with the students before we begin, so I can identify which students grasp what we're talking about that day and which students need that further explanation so that they're going to be on track for that day's lesson.
Of course, the big question is, well, how do you actually write them? On page 4, you'll notice that students need to be told why they're using a learning goal. It's very easy to do it to them, give them a learning goal, this is what you have to do, but engage them in the process of why we've got the learning goals. They're here so that you know where we're going, so that as we go through the lesson you can refer back to it, so you can chart your course, so that you can answer the question, how am I going? Because right now we're going to clearly show you where we're going. The other one is, I think, interesting, was the context isn't something you'll necessarily find in a learning goal. And if all your learning goals do have context, then it's time to zoom out a little bit with them. So it says there, the learning goal would be to be able to write clear instructions, and the context is the bicycle tyre. So the learning goal, if it had the context, would say to be able to write instructions about how to change a tyre. Okay, we want to zoom out a bit from that, keep the context out of it, because the learning goal should be transferable, a transferable skill applicable in multiple contexts. So to be able to present an argument either for or against an emotionally charged proposition, and it might be that you're talking about suicide with, year 10 at the time, but the context, if we can remove those from the learning goal. To design fair tests for scientific questions, we're talking about the habitat of a moth particularly, and that's what they'll talk about in the assessment of that goal. But the goal, where possible, we don't put the context in so that it can be a transferable one we use in multiple circumstances. Hattie has a lot to say on the research on learning goals. So visible learning for teachers, he talks about challenge, that a learning goal needs to have challenge. If it doesn't have challenge, it does not have an effect size. So if you have challenge, you're hitting the 0.6. If you have no challenge, then it's reasonably close to a zero proposition. So if the kids aren't engaged with the goal, now the problem is always that point of dissonance, isn't it? We always want kids to get that point which is just beyond them, that point of dissonance, a bit of uncertainty about where they're going, because it does create positive tension if. So the if is we anticipate that that doubt, I suppose, and construct the conversation around the learning goal in a positive way, that we sell the outcome with them, we garner their confidence. And the key, well, quite obviously probably, is linking to prior learning. This is the next step, this is the step after, this is the chain of events, which is why I like the water droplet one with Walt and Wilf and Tib or whatever it was. I really liked why are we learning this, to make that really clear in the explanation of the learning goal. Commitment is the second, so the most critical element in the research is challenge. The second is commitment. It's a definite second to challenge, however. So if you have to take a punt between the two of them, you leave out commitment and you only work on the challenge part, because it's peer influence. The commitment to the goal is very heavily peer influenced, but also it's the oxygen for the challenge. Okay, you might find it challenging, but unless you commit to it, unless you get that oxygen running in the kids, they're not going to engage with it. And Hattie talks about three things: relevant, authentic, and engaging. The learning goal needs to tick the boxes of relevant, authentic, and engaging. And then he talks about probably the most potent of all the visual learning areas for Hattie, and that's he calls it student expectations, which is merely predicting performance against set goals. I will be able to achieve this learning goal, and I've got these goals in place to do it. So if we engage kids in that process, it's incredibly potent. Dweck tells us to talk to kids in that process about not being smart. In terms of the efficacy of the learning goal, we will strip it bare if we say you're so smart, you're so clever. Dweck says that we need to talk about grit and engagement with a process. So if we say, you've tried really hard and look at the outcome you've got, you must be so proud of your efforts here, we will get the student expectations ball running with kids. But if we say you're smart and you're clever, it doesn't. So I'll send around a video summarising the Dweck thing. It's really quite fascinating that kids who are told they're smart will subsequently try less complex tasks and take fewer risks. And as we know, learning is about trying more complex tasks and learning from the mistakes. And I think the how am I going stage, the middle of the three questions, is where this is most potent. So if the kids at a C, if they say, I reckon I'm getting this line in the rubric at the moment, if they're at a C but they think they're a B, Then the conversation's about what's next. So student expectations, engaging a goal and steps to get there. It's just going straight to it straight away. But if they're like currently achieving quite high in the rubric, but they think they're reasonably low or mid-level, then we need to unpack the rubric with them again before we launch into that whole process of where are we going and what are the steps. The next area, so Hattie talks about challenge, commitment, student expectations. He also talks about conceptual understanding. And I quoted earlier point 6 of his 6 points, which summarises everything for him. Point 4, he says this about conceptual understanding. Teachers need to move from the single idea to multiple ideas and to relate them and extend these ideas such that learners construct and reconstruct knowledge and ideas. It's not the knowledge or ideas, but the learner's construction of the knowledge and these ideas that is critical. So if you have a look at page 5, it's got the solo taxonomy. You may or may not have seen it before. It's better than Bloom's with learning goals. Bloom's talks about thinking, Solo talks about learning. So a learning goal is about what we do to learn. So they're probably better ideas to use. And you'll notice it goes from the unistructural to the extended. So a single idea to multiple ideas, and then just a number of different verbs to use in the learning goals. So I find those sort of things helpful. So from the beginning of the unit, I'm going to use verbs which are more on the left-hand side, but as I progress through the unit to develop their underpinning knowledge, they then combine those concepts together so they can express it in a new and creative way. The learning goals will show a transition in those verbs as well. The other thing I'll do with Solo, I've got a whole stack of PDFs which unpack some of the graphic organisers which are there. I actually find that quite helpful, those graphic organisers. If you're going to do a sequence, what does it look like? If you're going to do a classify, what does it look like? Just in terms of blocks of information and kids drawing it together. So I'll send that out just for interest. By all means, if you're ardent on Bloom's and are using that effectively, keep using it effectively. But I've found the Solo work quite interesting as I've looked at it. The other thing I'll get you to look at is bottom of page 4, the Ontario checklist. So the Ontario Department of Ed have those 4 points to tick off about whether it's a great learning goal or not. So does it identify the knowledge skills from the curriculum syllabus? Is it incremental and deconstructed with the kids? Is it written in their language and from their perspective? And is it specific and observable so you can actually see whether they've achieved it or not? At that point I'm going to ask Robin to come up. I've asked a couple of teachers to talk to us about how learning goals are impacting them and their practice in the classroom. And Rob does a really nice job in the art room with the series of learning goals to get kids through an entire unit.
Yeah. Clearly I've got to change some of them though, I have to see through that first bit. Okay, so to start with, clearly we've got to start with the curriculum when we're establishing the learning goals, because this is where we get our knowledge and understanding from. So I want to just give a quick example of a Year 6 curriculum learning goal. So visual arts involves modifying visual arts elements, concepts, processes and forms to express ideas, considering intended audiences and intended purposes through images and objects. Okay, so clearly Year 6 kids aren't really going to understand that, probably just like some of you. So to make the goal attainable, we've got to be able to change it into what I call kids speak. So in my art classroom, once I've changed it into kids speak, and at the moment I'm the one putting it into kids speak, that becomes my overarching goal for the entire unit. Essentially, what that was saying was that we are being introduced to the elements of art and learning about how they work together to create artworks. Right, so hopefully the kids will understand that a lot easier. Obviously, when I introduce a learning goal, we just go through what the elements of art mean. That's why that's in bold, because that's the goal for the entire term. Okay, then comes the harder part. How do we get there? How do we reach that one learning goal? To get there, we have to make smaller, more specific goals along the way, and that enables me just to check for understanding during the process. And I get these learning goals from my assessment tasks. And that's an example of some of the learning goals along the way. Each of them talks about learning about the elements of art, but then I go through individual elements. So to be able to get an overall understanding of the 5 elements of art, I've got to treat each one separately. So with these 4 assessment tasks, that's what I've done, except for this last one. In this last learning goal, that's the culminating activity for the term, and so they need to use and identify all of the learning goals in that final task. Okay, dare I say it, it is a journey. The overarching curriculum learning goal is the end destination, but it's often a long trip, so you need to make stopovers en route to refuel, have maintenance checks and break up the trip for the well-being of the passengers. And that's why I like to look at it. If you can keep that in the back of your mind when you're setting learning goals, it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Thank you, Rob. And Tonya is going to talk about how UBD's been impacting her learning goals.
Okay, so when I first started doing my planning, and I would design the whole learning process, then I would design the assessment criteria, and then I would try and find my learning goals. When I started with the UBD, I would design my assessment, design my learning, and then try and find my learning goals. So the more I actually read into this and the more I started studying, the more I believe that UBD was actually ruining my life. So, however, now that I'm using it and I'm probably getting a little bit more knowledgeable in it, I've actually found that UBD is probably helping me a little bit. And I guess the first thing that you need to do is, what are your learning goals? What do you want the kids to get out of this? And the mistake that I was probably making, and it's probably been reinforced, is I've been looking at to design a CD cover. But designing a CD cover isn't really a transferable goal. It's not something, please don't ask me any questions.
What's UBD?
UBD is understanding by design.
Thanks.
Sorry. I just presumed you're all here for my first waffling on that I did for like 2 hours. You have to design your learning goals first. You've got to, so ask yourself, what should the students know and understand and be able to do? So these are your transferable skills. How do you prioritise and narrow down the content you want to teach, which fits within the limited framework of the course? So it's more talking about skills and knowledge and understanding more so than designing that. So UBD basically gets you to ask yourself 3 questions, and that helps you with your curricular priorities. So the questions are, what should participants hear, read, view, explore, or otherwise encounter? So the knowledge is worth being familiar with. So what is actually worth it? What's something that they can take from English to history to geography to maths, stuff like that. So what knowledge and skills should participants master? So sharpen your choices by considering what is important to know and do for your students. What facts, concepts and principles should they know, and what processes, strategies and methods should they learn to use. So these are the things that they're asking you to consider when you write your learning goals. What are the big ideas and important understandings participants should retain? These choices are your enduring understandings or your transferable skills that you want students to remember after they've forgotten the details of the course. So these are the questions that I tend to ask myself when I'm designing my learning goals, and my learning goals is what guides my planning now. It's not my assessment that guides it, it's my learning goals. How do I assess those learning goals, and how do I teach to the assessment to attain those learning goals? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah? So
thank you. So on page 7, down the bottom half of that page, we've got a less effective column and a more effective column, and then some space to figure out what makes one better than the other. So we are learning to use stated and implied information and ideas in text to make simple inferences. Is not a terribly effective learning goal, but we are learning to use clues in the text to know what the author is saying without writing it in words is more effective. Would someone like to postulate why? Tina?
Because it's in student speak.
It's in student speak. So with your mates on the table, if you could just work through those two columns and theorise why you think one is better than the other.
I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine.
Because in one sense we're saying, we thought you were saying that there have to be transferable learning goals, but this one is not transferable. I can identify several geometric properties related to quadrilaterals. It's all very specific.
The transferable thing is about quadrilaterals, that's the concept. It'd be context specific if you're talking about like the quadrilateral in the house. So like with Robbins, was context which had specific, like the elements of art, and the less specific ones was, line and texture using the scratch drawing, colour using pop art.
So you can be specific in your ones, but you keep overarching.
Yeah. What's the big idea? Yeah.
Now we get it.
Can't none bring me down. The love is too high to bring me down. Can't none.
I'll just draw that to a close if I can. And I'll leave the understanding to the wisdom of the table at that point. I won't deal with it any further. In a moment we're going to do a stand up, hand up, pair up. Did you say? So just to remind you, Larry's going to stand up. Larry's going to hand up. And then we're going to walk around. And then someone like me is going to yell out, pair up. He's going to have his card, and I should have mine. We're going to stand shoulder to shoulder. He's going to read his. Oh, yeah.
Okay. You will learn about the relationship of the angles in a triangle, grade 8 mathematics.
I think that's probably a better learning goal than most because it is in very clear and simple kid language.
You're great.
Did you say?
Oh, sorry, yes. Did you say that you think that's a better learning goal than most because it is in simple kid language?
I did. Then we will swap.
Oh, no, you'll do yours first.
I'll do mine first.
You do his first. You do yours first.
I can use a variety of techniques to convey a sense of movement.
And I'll answer it, and then we'll swap.
And then we'll be walking around like this until once again I say pair up. So.
Bring me down, I said, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like
hand up. One more time, hand up. One more time, hand up. Up. Pair up. Pair up. Pair up.
That's what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you.
Make no little plans. So if you have a look at page 8, we're going to skip through parts of the booklet now because time is getting away on me, unfortunately. We were going to do page 8 where you look at the question, reflect on your practice, and so that's the think, pair up with a partner, and then square again. Do another one of those. So if I can encourage you to have a serious, only take 10 minutes, sit down and think through exactly what that is. So having thought about learning goals, why they're important, what they look like, how they can be done, what would make a better one to a worse one, how might practice a worse one. That wasn't a learning goal, so that's fine. That I think is what a reflective practitioner is. Then on pages 9 and 10, if you've been in the year 10 to 12 PLCs, that's the sort of thing that we've been talking about and the sort of documentation for next term's PLC we'll be looking at. How do we get kids to document their engagement with learning goals as they answer the 3 questions of the assessment as. A friend I found summarised it like this.
It's challenged me to think a little bit differently. Initially, it looked overwhelming. I sat down with some other teachers, talked about it a little bit, and set a learning goal, a 1-sentence learning goal for a lesson that I already had, and worked more towards that, and it's made a major difference. As far as marking, it's been a pleasure to mark their work because the majority of their work is much better than it was even early on in the year when we were just getting into learning goals and setting success criteria, and they weren't quite so good at it. It's improved even considerably since then.
So how do students know what achievement looks like? Well, they've got a learning goal and it's a challenging one that they want to be engaged with it. How do they know whether they've nailed the learning goal? Well, they've got success criteria to chart their course with that. And as teachers, we are engaging in this process of learning goals because it activates kids to be owners of their own learning, and it activates kids to be learning resources for each other. I'm not sure if I'm chasing a butterfly at this point, but it intrigues me that Dan Pink says extrinsic goals are useless, basically. So his thesis in his book Drive and his TED Talk, which is a really good TED Talk, just Google Ted Pink Drive TED. He says they don't work, yet Hattie's research says it does. And I had to think about why the imposed goals, in a sense that we're talking about this afternoon, work. Well, I think it's because that when you deconstruct the learning goal with the kids, they become committed to it. So we just don't give kids a learning goal. We tell them why we're using learning goals and we deconstruct it with them. When we then say to the kids, well, how do you think we'll achieve that learning goal? We're involving them in the co-construction of success criteria at that point. And then as we assess their progress against that learning goal within and between lessons, that impacts both the practice and the engagement. On page 12, you have the brick wall, so to speak. I find that to be a very helpful piece of paper, and more than likely that will be my assessment as piece for how we're going with you guys, by sending it out and just asking you to fill in a single learning intention that you're doing. So the learning intention, what is it? And then you just quickly say, well, what's the relevance? How does it fit into the bigger picture and why would kids want to be engaged with it? How is it modelled? What's the exemplar that we did with it? The success criteria, quickly putting in there what the success criteria was for that area, and the check for understanding how we got kids to reflect on the learning goal and their success upon the way. I haven't made up my mind. It's either page 8 or page 12 that I'll send out early next term asking for your feedback on. If you wouldn't mind, I'll advise when I make the decision next term. What we looked at this afternoon makes kids better than their best, and what we've looked at this afternoon engages the kids' expert voice, and it is an expert voice in how they learn. And the effect size of a learning goal is 0.6. It's the bedrock of the assessment verb that we looked at last term. And this is the real elephant in the room. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to keep going. So each of the lessons should have a destination. We all have them. There's not a single person in this room who hasn't planned out their term with their kids and what they want them to achieve. We need to see that understanding articulated to the kids, and we need kids to understand that. So when we looked at the success criteria, we said not only were they simple, clear, transferable, across context and visible to students, we can still do that in the way we think will work, and the kids will not be able to articulate what they are learning and why. So at that point we need to say, Okay, I'm ticking off simple, clear, transferable, context and visible, but I need to tweak how I'm presenting it with them. We need to keep doing that until we can ask the kids, what are you learning and why? And they can say, well, today we're learning about polynomial expressions because in 3 weeks' time we're going to be applying that new knowledge to whatever the assessment is for that particular thing. Really, I mean, I can't stress how much that is the elephant in the room. That's really what goes unsaid around here. As long as we're having a go and just keep going, we will get better at it and we'll get to that point. And I think we might be approaching a close point where we'll have the bulk of teachers, and Lynn Sherritt says you need 95% of your staff doing it. We'll have the bulk of teachers engaging in the assessment stuff across multiple subjects, across successive years, and we'll start seeing the effect that we're after that Hattie talks about. And it only happens not by the Hitler stance, but by the, you don't have to be perfect, just keep going. So that's what we're going to do.
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
What about if you don't know how to tell the kids why they're learning something? Is it okay to say, because I have to teach it to you? Is that ever okay?
It's a reality of life.
Do why?
We need to then, got a specific?
Well, I'm thinking more of art. Like at the moment, we're doing 2D landscapes and 3D models from those landscapes to just build up their skills in art. I don't know.
It's a hard one to sell to kids because, I'm a solid advocate for comprehensive education. Otherwise, you have this breadth of understanding of the world, so that as an adult,
yes,
I can appreciate it.
That's true.
My example of it is in Darwin, the school went for a 2-week hike with Year 9 through the McDonald Ranges, which is just outside Alice Springs. So in the middle of the desert, 2 weeks. One of the days, and it's the culminating one, is climbing Mount Sonder. So like a 4-hour trek to get up. It absolutely kills you to get up there. But when you get up there, you realise you've been spending the past week going on these ridges, which is just the earth, which all of a sudden has been tilted like that. So because of my Year 9, Year 10 science, I looked at that and went, far out. That is just amazing that this mountain I've just spent 5 hours climbing, which has just about killed me, literally. That's just been lifted all as one great big thing. So my comprehensive education gave me that moment of going, wow, and I think whenever we look at the amazing things of creation and science, we should be going wow every time. So that's the big answer to the kids, that we're giving them an education which enables them to appreciate all sorts of things. But in that room, there's going to be kids who are going to be doing what the Year 12s are doing now. There's some amazing art coming out of Year 12, and unless you do it in Year 4, you're not going to get... Yeah. Larry?
I tell my kids that they're either drinking a drink of water or they're eating their veggies. Because either you're thirsty, so you know it's going to help right now, or there's some vague future where eating your veggies is going to help. So and that seems to work for them. So, yeah.
That's nice. Okay, thanks for your time this afternoon, everyone.